Are you aware of any member of the Elkhart Police Department having been accused of sexually harassing another member of the Elkhart Police Department?
I believe there have been some of those claims, yes.
And in fact, there have been allegations against ranking members of the Elkhart Police Department about sexual harassment.
I believe so, yes.
And those members are still employed at the Elkhart Police Department, aren't they?
I'm not sure of all the complaints or the nature of all those. Some are, some aren't.
Isn't your part of your duty as the assistant chief to know the status of those allegations and whether the subjects of those allegations are still employed at the department?
To some degree, yes.
YouTubers out there. Channel 2 for right now, we've got the other out front.
We're going to take the fire truck with the channel 2 just for a minute.
The blinds are shut at the police department. The cop walkers parked outside. The parties that have been trying to get us on film, doing something and causing issues for the city. They're on the sidewalk. I'm going to be back in service. Can I get a second? We're going to order yourself.
Do you have another witness?
Yes, Your Honor, we can call Assistant Chief Whitmyer and immediately, and then perhaps Officer Roundtree could be made available at a more convenient time for him after lunch.
Chief, remind you remain under oath from yesterday. Thank you.
Good morning, Chief. Thank you for coming.
Morning.
If an officer had been initially called into work before they arrived at work and was disregarded, could he submit a call-in slip to be paid?
Possibly. It would depend on the situation surrounding that. How long did they actually come in? Did they get a phone call? What'd they do?
I'd like to go to the date of July 12th, 2022, as your department is investigating the possible burglary of the Bees 3 business. Did Joy Phillips inform you that when Dustin Young called her and asked her to come in, that he hung up on her as she was asking for more details about the case?
I think she did mention that, and the video, I believe itself, that was played yesterday, shows him hanging up on her.
But I'm not referencing the video. My question is really, did Joy Phillips ever tell you, ever let you know that this had happened?
She may have. I've seen it written. I believe I've seen it testified to. She may have. I don't recall. I've heard it a handful of times since then.
Were you aware that the complainant in that case, in the Bees 3 robbery, was not the actual owner of the building?
Yeah, I think it's been established she was the daughter of the owner.
Did Joy Phillips ever make you aware, as you were investigating, as your department was investigating this alleged burglary, that at no point did the owner's daughter say that she saw the occupants of the gold Cadillac inside the Bees 3 building, and that nothing was stolen from the Bees 3 building on that day, as opposed to other days.
So I think we established that we didn't have any witnesses that saw any of the two occupants of the gold Cadillac inside the building. To state as fact that nothing was stolen, if I remember correctly, it's a 13,000 approximately square foot building. It's hard to say what was or was not stolen based on what was recovered out of the car. I don't think that there was, I don't believe the owner of Bees 3's daughter recognizes anything stolen, but typically in a 13,000 square foot building, there could be a handful of things missing that we may or may not have caught.
But on the July 12th, 2022, the owner's daughter did not say, in fact, that something had been stolen on the 12th.
Yeah, I don't believe she was able to say if anything was stolen or not stolen out of that building.
She had complained that other things had indeed been stolen in the past, in the recent past, but she knew of nothing stolen on the 12th.
Yeah, again, we don't know anything that definitively was stolen. There was a handful of burglaries. I think that's been established, yes.
So there there's no report of stolen items that could therefore have been inside the gold Cadillac.
Can you rephrase that or repeat that?
Since nothing was stolen that day, or there were no reports of stolen items on the 12th, there was no reason to believe that stolen items from Bees 3 would be found inside the trunk of the gold Cadillac.
I think the two issues with that statement is that the focus, there was, Sergeant Young reported, I think initially, either in his supplement report or in his body cam, he talks about the smell of alcohol, and at some point during the course of the initial investigation, there was a bar inside, and I believe alcohol had been previously taken from a bar. I don't know that we watched the video that showed it, but it's actually a stocked bar. It's a private one, I believe, but I believe they initially suspected that alcohol could have been stolen out of there based on the strong odor of alcohol surrounding the vehicle. It was well beyond, from my understanding, my interpretation of it, the strong odor of alcohol was beyond the odor of alcohol coming from someone's breath. Right? It was like an alcohol spill. The other second nature with not knowing what may or may not have been stolen was the fact that the focus quickly became whether or not detectives were going to respond, and that kind of sucked the oxygen out of the initial investigation.
But there were no facts connecting the smell of alcohol on the drivers to Bees 3. I mean, there are a variety of places in Elkhart where you can get a drink.
The underlying facts were that an officer saw a Cadillac backed up to an open door with a trunk open that later fled when the owner's daughter showed up. It was a bar was inside that building, and there was alcohol, to my understanding, spilled in and around that vehicle that they could tell.
When she was explaining in Detective Phillips' summary, did she inform you that Sergeant Young did not provide her with all the information that she needed as an on-call detective?
In a summary that she provided me,
Yes, sir.
I haven't looked at that summary in quite a while. She may have.
You know if there were any other detectives involved in the July 12th incident who failed to document their involvement in that investigation?
I'm not aware, no.
Counsel, let me just interrupt and say Sergeant Roundtree is now in the room.
Oh, thank you, sir. Okay. Would you have any reason to disagree with me if I told you that Sergeant Roundtree's report on the Bees 3 incident is dated August 18th, 2022? Officer, I'm going to hand you Exhibit 8 and 9. Could you identify these exhibits? These are, these are Phillips exhibits 8 and 9. Eight and 9.
I don't see a distinction between 8 and 9. It looks to be at least a portion of an investigation from 1125 West Beardsley.
And this report was printed on August 18th, 2022, which would be 37 days after the incident, wouldn't it?
I'll trust your math on that, but sounds approximately correct.
Would there be any reason for Sergeant Roundtree's and Detective Barron's reports not to be in that printed copy?
Typically, we like to do them relatively close to the time of the action. That doesn't always happen, but without looking through it or looking back at their subs to see when they were done or submitted, I'd have to check for sure.
Would it surprise you to learn that that Sergeant Roundtree submitted his report on October 5th, 2022?
Which report?
His report on the July 12th incident.
Which portion of it?
The search of the Cadillac.
Yeah, that would be ideally not an optimum time frame, but I'm not sure that that's the date that it was done without seeing it.
Okay. So that was 85 days later, wasn't it?
Possibly, again, I'll trust your math on it. I'm not sure what supplements you're looking at. This is a rather thick stack of paper, so I'm not sure when the subs were done or when they were. Oftentimes in the Bureau will complete one or will start one. As that information gets added, it won't be timestamped or supervisor approved till later down the road.
Did Sergeant Roundtree receive any sort of reprimand for documenting his involvement in the July 12th incident 85 days later?
Obviously, I'm not aware of it, and if we weren't aware of it, most likely not.
Isn't it part of the city's policy that you have to be aware of such things?
Beware of
That the report is submitted 85 days late?
So it would be a supplement to a report, and as a captain and as the lieutenants in CID and the sergeants within CID, there's hundreds of cases that come through approximately a dozen detectives. Ideally, if those situations become apparent to us, yes, we address them. To be aware of every sup that comes through at every moment and time check and time stamp the hundreds of cases, whether it's arrests or follow-up or investigation, is near an impossible ask.
Okay. I'm going to read to you from policy, Elkhart Police Department Policy 323. Incomplete reports, unorganized reports, or reports that are delayed without supervisory approval are not acceptable. Reports shall be processed according to established priorities or to a special priority made necessary under exceptional circumstances. Are you familiar with that policy?
Vaguely, I believe so, yes.
Was there some exceptional circumstance that justified Sergeant Roundtree submitting his report 85 days after the incident?
Again, I'm not aware of that. I haven't seen the sup. I haven't seen the timestamps. I'm not sure that that was actually the case or how it's being represented in this. If there's an ongoing issue of detectives or officers repeatedly delaying reports, that gets brought to our attention and we address it. In this case, I haven't even seen the subs or the timestamps to be sure.
Didn't Detective Barron search the Cadillac?
I don't recall he was present during the search. I don't know if he was an active participant in it or not.
He didn't submit a report at all, did he?
I don't know.
How about Detective Payne? Did he submit a report?
I don't know.
Can you find one in there?
You want me to sort through this pack of papers for a single piece that you don't know the page number on it?
Well, if I told you that it's not in there, would you have, that it is in there? If I told you that his report was 29 days late, would you have any reason to disagree with me?
To disagree or agree, I wouldn't without seeing the supplement and the timestamps on it, or the nature of the sub, or to get a chance to discuss that with Payne or Barron or Roundtree. It's hard to answer.
Was there any investigation regarding policy violations of late reports or failure to submit a report from for Sergeant Roundtree and these other detectives?
Reference this?
Yes, sir.
Not that I'm aware of at all, no.
But everything, all of Joy Phillips' alleged misconduct was investigated. Why were these aspects of the case not investigated?
I think it's a little unfair, and if you want to answer, you can ask the question, but I think to correlate a report that's possibly a day or two late versus lying, misrepresentation, and a poor attitude, to compare and contrast those as the same would be inaccurate.
I'd like to go back. Isn't, you know, did Detective Phillips ever tell you that other officers in the department, other detectives, are afraid to speak up when they witness policy violations because they figured that this may have negative effect on their careers?
Possibly. I believe she's made that claim in the past.
What would happen to an officer if he observed police misconduct and failed to report it?
It would depend. That's a very open, broad question. Typically, we encourage officers to report misconduct.
Are officers generally obligated to report police misconduct if they observe it?
Typically, if they observe it, yes.
Chief, I'm going to hand you Phillips Exhibit 7. IT, could you please put Phillips Exhibit 7 on display? Yes, it is. No, it's an email. What? Oh, yeah, it's in a picture format, but it's an email. It's page by page, so you may just display the first page. The 4-page email with a photo of each page. Oh, thank you, sir. Officer, do you recognize Exhibit 7?
Yeah, it's an email that Detective Phillips sent to me the day after that the burglary report and the call-in situation on the 12th.
Could you read it?
The entirety of it?
I think so.
Captain Whitmyer, I was going to wait. Do you want me to read just the relative
You can
stuff or
read-
the completely?
Read the body. Yeah, you don't have to read the header.
Not the first paragraph. Skip the first
Yeah, you can skip the first paragraph and go to the ones that have been highlighted.
reference to each other.
On 7/12/22 at approximately 16:47 hours, dispatch called and advised that Sergeant Justin Young was requesting that I call from on his department cell phone. When I called him, he advised that they had a burglary where an officer had been driving past a business which had been broken into several times over the course of the last few weeks and observed a gold Cadillac in the parking lot. So he called the owner to ask if anyone should be there, and she advised that no one should be in the lot. When the officer turned around, the car was gone. He proceeded to say that the owner got there. She saw the vehicle leaving the scene and got into pursuit with the gold Cadillac and chased it over 100 miles an hour until he crashed. He stated that both the driver and the passenger were taken to the hospital and one was in critical condition. He advised that the vehicle flipped several times and that the contents of the vehicle was thrown through the roof due to the force of the accident. He advised the reconstruction was coming to handle the accident. He stated that the owner, that there were bottles of alcohol out at the scene. I asked him what the business was and he stated B3s. I informed him that I was not familiar with it and he stated that he wasn't either. I asked him if it was broken into and he said yes. There was forced entry. I asked him if anyone saw the suspects in the vehicle leaving the business. Could anyone prove that they were the ones that broke into the business? And he stated that Van Scoik saw the car in the parking lot sitting outside that door. I explained that he needed to have proof that they were the suspects from the business and asked if there were cameras, and Young said, well, I have the property that was stolen at the car right here. I asked him how he knew it was stolen merchandise from the building. He said that would be for you guys to figure out, I would assume. I stated that would be a good starting point, and he replied, by the time we will have the investigation done, so do you just want us to do it? I need a glass of water. Continue reading. the rest of it?
Yes, sir, please.
Is there a gist to this? I was being somewhat sarcastic, but I'll get it when I'm done.
Did you need?
I'm okay. Is there a gist to this you want me to point to?
I will have some questions for you after you read it.
Is there a concept or a theory that the question is coming from? It's posted up for everyone to read. I guess if I can continue to read it, it's just, if there's a specific driving question, I'm familiar with it. If you want to point to a section of it, I can read that section and answer the question in that section.
How long do you expect to be further with the chief?
We'll probably be another 20 or 30 minutes, sir.
Sergeant Roundtree has come in very, very promptly. We're then looking at a lunch break and possibly cross-examination of the chief. Can you estimate when you expect to put him on the stand?
Probably, probably about 30 minutes to 45 minutes after we return from lunch would be my guess. So that would be what, one?
Sergeant Roundtree, can you come back at 1:30? Yes, sir. Thank you. We'll see you then.
So I do have some questions for you, sir, Chief, based on the email that just read from Joy Phillips, did she inform you that no other detectives speak up about potential misconduct because they're afraid to be targeted?
Yes, towards the end of it, she does note that.
Did you do anything with that complaint?
I believe that complaint has been addressed a handful of times. I'd have to look back. I know there's some other officers involved in addressing complaints that Joy's brought forward on behalf of other officers, but I don't have specific knowledge on them or intimate knowledge of those investigations.
Well, how was that complaint addressed?
In this sense,
Yes, well, how was that specific complaint addressed?
I know that a majority of our members won't speak up or speak on how they feel because they do not want to be targeted, but we do share it between us. So in this particular case, later she specifically mentions other officers that refused to write a search warrant. I believe it was touched on a bit yesterday. So at the time we heard that they refused to do search warrants, I had talked to those detectives specifically.
Did you address any concerns that, generally speaking, officers are afraid to report police misconduct because it might have a negative effect on their careers?
Did I go around to the department and ask everyone based on Joy's vague comment? No, I did not.
How about the detectives?
As the captain back there, I was previously a sergeant. I talked to most detectives on a pretty regular basis. I made a habit of going around and talking to them. Oftentimes it would be uncomfortable if I specifically said, hey, a third party had made a complaint on your behalf. We had gotten a handful of those from Detective Phillips over the course of the years. But I would oftentimes check in on them and see how they're going, what's going on. And usually with a casual conversation, they would make comments or talk about how things were going, or I gave them an opportunity to start sharing concerns if they had them.
Did you ask for any kind of independent investigation?
Did I call the Indiana State Police based on the sentence written by Detective Phillips? Is that what you're asking?
Or for any kind of independent investigation?
Again, I know there's been at least one occasions, if not two, where Detective Phillips has made a complaint on the behalf of somebody else and they've been investigated.
Well, is there a procedure for taking a complaint and investigating it?
Yeah, if a complaint comes in, it'll get entered and either looked at the shift level or by internal affairs.
Was that done in Joy Phillips' case?
In this sense?
Yes, sir.
So Detective Phillips said that the entirety of the department feels like they're targeted?
That there is a concern among many officers that they cannot report police misconduct.
Are you asking what we did or did not do based on this?
Did you even log in a complaint? That's all my answer, all my question.
I don't believe a specific complaint was logged in based on that sentence, no.
Doesn't the policy require that?
I guess if you would determine that is a complaint, I would assume that a detective who has multiple years of service on the vague nature of just slinging mud at the wall to see what sticks, it was not entered as a complaint, no.
I'm going to read to you from policy 1010.1. Policy provides guidelines for the reporting, investigation, and disposition of complaints regarding the conduct of members of the Elkhart Police Department. Oh, I'm sorry. I'm reading from policy 1010, which I believe was read into evidence yesterday. No. Oh, two. Yes, ma'am.
So that's respondent to Exhibit 2?
Yes, ma'am. This policy provides guidelines for the reporting, investigation, and disposition of complaints regarding the conduct of members of the Elkhart Police Department. This policy shall not apply to any questioning, counseling, instruction, informal verbal admonishment, or other routine and unplanned contact of a member in the normal course of duty by a supervisor or any other member, nor shall this policy apply to a criminal investigation. And then 10.2, the Elkhart Police Department takes seriously all complaints regarding the service provided by the department and the conduct of its members. The department will accept and address all complaints of misconduct in accordance with the policy and applicable federal, state, and local laws, municipal county rules, and the requirements of any collective bargaining agreements. It's also the policy of this department to ensure that the community can report misconduct without concern for reprisal or retaliation. Was not investigating that Joy Phillips complaint in accordance with that policy?
What's the complaint? The majority of the members don't speak up to who? Who are the majority of the members? Who can they not speak up to? Their peers, their supervisors, the chief, the mayor?
Well,
I'm not sure who.
How
where
about
to go.
certainly Joy Phillips' peers in the detective bureau?
Right. So the way I read it, and you can agree or disagree, is that it's a 3-page rambling about an on-call situation where I believe Joy Phillips knew she made a mistake and started writing about other accusations, pointing out other perceived or made-up problems to divert attention away from her.
Okay. What did she make up? What is this mistake?
We're on day 2 of it. I can rehash most of it if you'd like, I guess.
Chief, what would happen to an officer who observed police misconduct and failed to report it?
What kind of conduct? What's the scenario base for the kind of contact you're referring to?
Excessive force.
Whose version of excessive force?
The officer believes that there is excessive force, a potentially reporting officer, but the officer doesn't report it because he's concerned, doesn't report for whatever reason, does not report it. Does he face any misconduct, has he violated any policies if he fails to report what he believes to be misconduct by a fellow officer?
Ideally, if an officer views or watches something that he believes to be excessive, I would hope that they would come forward with the name, the date, the time of what happened and where it happened so we could look into it.
Would the officer who failed to report that be potentially violating any policies?
Potentially, yes. There's lots of factors in this scenario that are vague that would change what the reaction is. Was it something we could universally agree was a grotesque use of force that was abusive, that he was covering up to cover up a colleague? Was it something that he wasn't sure of? He wasn't exactly sure. There's mitigators and aggravators to that scenario. It's hard to answer with the vague scenario.
How about if instead of excessive force, the misconduct was lying during an investigation?
Again, if it was a deliberate lie, and we would expect people to report that. Oftentimes there is debate within law enforcement, much like any other line of work, on their perception of what happened. But if there's a gross, intentional, misleading lie and it wasn't reported by an officer that was aware of it, that would be an issue, yes.
So you fielded all the complaints about Joy Phillips' misconduct, but you didn't take seriously any of her complaints, did you?
When I fielded all, what do you mean? I fielded a handful, but all is not accurate, no?
But you investigated Joy Phillips, and you eventually brought charges against her, but you did not investigate anything that she alleged.
I don't recall investigating much of anything other than at a shift level or division level on some of the claims she made that concerns around her claim that we had several detectives refusing to write search warrants or refusing to follow orders that were lawful from supervisors. I looked into that initially just to make sure we weren't completely missing the boat within the division. To say I investigated as far as IA or formal investigated or that I brought charges is not accurate.
Do you know if Internal Affairs conducted any type of investigation into her? Oh, excuse me. I am sorry. Do you know if Internal Affairs conducted any type of investigation against Sergeant Young, Sergeant Roundtree, or Sergeant Van Scoik regarding the incident of July 12th?
I don't believe they did, no.
Did you inform Detective Phillips that there was no investigation and that you weren't going to look into any of her allegations?
Did I inform her that I wasn't going to look into any of the allegations?
Yes, sir.
I don't know. And I guess I never sat her down and said, hey, Joy, what you provided me referenced this recent incident that we're going to completely ignore. No. Some of the allegations, again, like I mentioned with the detectives, the concerns on Van Scoik's video, those things were obviously looked at in the culmination of the investigation. We looked at much like most of us have in the last few days, we've looked at the body cam and haven't been able to sustain, from my understanding, any of the allegations that she made against other officers.
Did you inform Joy Phillips that there was an investigation about her?
I believe I did, yes.
How did you do that?
I believe I spoke with her and handed her a letter. I would have to look back at what I gave her.
Okay. Did you interview Joy Phillips?
I did not know.
Okay. Do you know if anyone interviewed Joy Phillips regarding those allegations?
I believe that's been asked and answered several times. I'm not aware of that. I know I haven't.
After the captain's review board on August 11th, well, first of all, did you participate in the captain's review board on August 11th?
August 11th of last year?
2022, yes, sir.
I believe so, yes.
Okay. After that captain's review board, did the allegations against Joy Phillips change?
I guess I'm not understanding where your question's going.
Did the charging affidavit differ from what was in benchmark?
I would have to look. I know from the captain's review board there's a handful of policies listed on the sheet that I gave then Chief Chris Seymour. Some of them were sustained, some of them were unsustained. I don't remember what actually came out of benchmark compared to what's made it on that review sheet and or what Chief Seymour put on his final letter.
Well, do you recall informing Detective Phillips that she was being accused of omitting facts or misrepresenting facts regarding the July 12th incident and that she would be given a specific list of her omissions or misrepresentations?
I remember telling her the nature that that there was the concern about the omission or misrepresentation of facts. I don't remember the specifics of the conversation.
Chief, I'm going to hand you what Phillips Exhibits 21 and 22. Could you identify those exhibits?
Just point out we're getting close to noon. So if you've got a convenient break point, think about
This is probably a convenient break point, sir. We can continue with this.
Since we didn't get the scheduled breaks, I'm going to say let's break until 1 o'clock, and we'll resume then.
Thank you, sir.
Welcome back, everyone. I hope the break refreshed everyone. We'll continue with the respondent's case.
Thank you, Your Honor. We would continue the examination of Chief Whitmyer.
Ed?
Chief, according to the benchmark complaints that you provided Detective Phillips on August 6th, what were the accusations against her?
One of them alleges that Detective Joy Phillips acted in a disrespectful and confrontational manner to two of her superior officers on 7/12. She also refused to acknowledge when I believe this is Denise Hauser's, when I was talking to her and I felt that she was developed a pattern of avoiding interactions with me for the last month or so. I wanted to document the occurrence as I have noticed a pattern of defiant behavior towards sergeants in particular. That was one of them. The second one, which I believe was done by Sergeant Roundtree, in essentially summary, it points to the actions of Detective Phillips on the day, the disrespect that Sergeant Roundtree felt in the conversations that she had with Detective Phillips during the call-in procedure, and I believe some of the information that he was told versus what was later told, or was what previously told to Dustin Young and then told to Sergeant Roundtree.
What were the alleged events that Detective Phillips was accused of being insubordinate about? Excuse me, let me rephrase that, sir. In what way was Detective Phillips insubordinate?
In these complaints, without going through them word by word, I'm not sure that insubordination was one of the claims.
What was she accused of failing to do?
What was she accused of failing to do? Is that what,
Yes,
what you
sir.
said?
Yes, sir.
I believe it's the fair representation of facts or evidence that was presented to her and how she relayed those to Sergeant Roundtree. And I believe the other portion was both her attitudes or actions towards Sergeant Denise Hauser earlier in that day during the regularly scheduled shift, and her actions towards Sergeant Roundtree later in the day.
Do you recall informing Detective Phillips that she was being accused of omitting material facts or representing facts regarding the July 12th incident at B's 3?
I believe I did inform her that. I don't remember the nature of how or when, and whether it was written or verbal. I don't recall exactly.
Did you tell her that you would provide her with a list of the facts she omitted?
I don't remember if I did that or not, no.
Did you ever supply her with those facts?
Much like I don't remember if I told her I would, I don't recall giving her a list or if I did or did not do that.
Now, you've viewed the recording of Sergeant Young on July 12th that was played earlier in this hearing, haven't you?
Yes, I have.
Did you notice any place in that recording where Sergeant Young tells or explains that that Sergeant Van Scoik observed a door open at 1125 West Beardsley.
I don't remember that specific portion of it.
Do you recall any place in that recording where Sergeant Young states that the trunk of the gold Cadillac was open?
I don't remember if Sergeant Young relays that in the recording or when he talks to Detective Phillips on the phone or not.
Do you recall any place in that recording where Detective Young on the phone tells Detective Phillips that he has witnesses to the burglary available to be interviewed?
I don't think that he uses the word available, but I believe there's at least 2 occasions where he says there's witnesses. Yes.
Well, but he never said there are witnesses to the burglary.
I would argue that if an officer drives by and sees a car backed up, whether he initially explained that the trunk was open and a door to the building was open or not, he would be a witness. I would also say that whether it's the owner or the owner's daughter arrives and finds people on foot in or around their 13,000 square foot warehouse that's been burglarized several times, although she may not see them in the building, to say that that's not a witness doesn't do justice to the investigation at all. So she, in fact, in my opinion, was very much told there was witnesses available.
But she never said she saw them in the building. She never said that she saw them take things out of the building. In fact, she never said that something was stolen that day, did she?
There was very much witnesses to a possible burglary that were stated on the phone call and told to Detective Phillips.
Okay. And in fact, she was already interviewed by someone else.
At what point in
The
time?
owner's daughter. And Sergeant Van Scoik had interviewed her.
Yeah, I believe Sergeant Van Scoik had done an initial field interview with her, yes.
And the witnesses, the drivers of the car, were in the hospital with head injuries.
I don't know the nature of the injury. I know one was, if I remember correctly, Sergeant Young mentions that one was at Memorial and critical, and the other one was EGH. I don't believe the one at EGH was critical. In fact, I think an officer went out and spoke with him that evening.
In fact, Detective Phillips never admitted any factual materials to Sergeant Roundtree because she had never been provided with any of the information prior to arriving at the scene of the accident, had she? Did she?
I don't believe that's correct.
Then what was it she omitted?
Can you rephrase that question?
Yeah. You just refused to concede that Joy Phillips omitted nothing from in her report to Sergeant Roundtree. Well, what did she omit?
The 2 main points that we came across from the captain's board standpoint was when she told Sergeant Roundtree, and the best of my recollection, was that there were no witnesses, when in fact there was an officer that drove by that saw the car backed up. Whether you want to debate the trunk was open or a door was open, an officer saw a car backed up to a building where there should be no occupants. The owner's daughter arrives and sees that vehicle. I believe they see at least a person out on foot, and then chases the vehicle away. That is a witness. So when Detective Phillips then tells Sergeant Roundtree there are no witnesses, in my opinion, that is a strong misrepresentation of facts. And then she goes on to say that the suspects are both critical. I don't recall on any of Dustin Young's footage where he says both are critical. One is at Memorial, and I will give grace to say most of the time someone goes Memorial, it's typically critical care. The other one was EGH. So she, in some ways, bend the truth, or bend the statement that there were no witnesses and there were no suspects available to speak with.
Yeah, isn't it obvious that when she said there were no witnesses, what she meant was that there were no witnesses available for her to interview, not that there were no witnesses whatsoever to the incident?
She said there were no witnesses, therefore there's no reason to come in, was the message that I got from what she was saying. There were clearly witnesses available to speak with.
And in fact, isn't it Sergeant Young who said told her there were no witnesses? I think what he told her was there were no witnesses for her to interview.
I don't remember that portion of the video.
On the video, he doesn't give her any names, does he? And he does not give her any names of witnesses for her to interview.
So if we don't have names, they're not witnesses. I believe he offered to give the names. I couldn't hear the other side of the conversation. Again, an officer witnessed the car there. An owner's daughter chased him away. There was witnesses of the crash that would put those people in the car as they fled the car, the one that was available. There were very much witnesses available to do an initial investigation. To categorize there as there being no witnesses available is incorrect and untrue.
Chief, were you present when Detectives Payne, Barron, Roundtree, and Phillips spoke to the owner's daughter on a speakerphone in Detective Payne's office on July 14th, 2022? This would be 2 days after the incident.
Yes, I believe so.
Do you recall the owner's daughter advising that there was no burglary to her father's business, that she never saw the occupants of the Cadillac inside her father's building, and that nothing was stolen?
I don't know that she ever said there was no burglary. I don't recall that. I think it's been determined that she never saw them in the building. And then at that point, there was nothing determined to be stolen. Again, this was the issue was this was 2 days later when an investigation should have been started, and some of these big investigative points should have been handled initially by the on-call detectives.
In that meeting, did you tell Detective Phillips to stop trying to protect crackheads?
I did. I either said crack or meth heads. I don't recall specifically what term I used.
Would that be considered disrespectful to say to address Detective Phillips in that way?
I guess if she determines it is, it's a standard, not standard, it's typical that these daytime burglaries or robberies are often committed by people under the influence of crack or meth or harder drugs. They usually do these burglaries or crimes to help facilitate their drug usage.
And at that meeting, Detective Phillips told you that the reason she was reluctant to write the search warrant was that she didn't believe there was probable cause, and that she was trying to protect the department from lawsuits. She told you that, didn't she?
They did say that, yes.
I'd like to change gears a bit, sir. Did Sergeant Hauser eventually file a complaint against Detective Phillips for downloading videos regarding the November 1st, 2022 episode?
There was a complaint filed by Detective. I believe she's the one that authored it. I'm not sure.
Do you know what videos Detective Phillips was accused of downloading?
I'm sorry, did you say?
Yeah.
I'm unclear on what scenario you're pointing to.
Do you know, regarding the complaint that Detective Phillips improperly downloaded videos, you are familiar with that allegation, aren't you?
I'm familiar with the allegations. I haven't seen the entirety of that investigation or what specific videos that you're referring to.
Right. Well, do you know what videos she was accused of downloading?
Based on the last few days and what I've heard, it would be videos surrounding the burglary.
Do you recall receiving these same videos on August 11th, 2022, as part of the investigation packet and formal complaint Detective Phillips provided to the Captain's Review Board?
There was some information provided. There was a 21-page written response. I believe there was some videos. I don't recall specifically.
Now, you were part of that Captain's Review Board, weren't you?
Correct.
At that Captain's Review Board, no one told Detective Phillips that it was inappropriate for her to download those videos. Isn't that correct?
I don't know if we did or didn't. At the time, we weren't sure what was on them. I don't remember Detective Phillips relaying what was on them necessarily during the Captain's Board, but we hadn't any time to, at that point, we hadn't any time to review what was in the packet, other than as Detective Phillips had an opportunity to talk to the captain's boards, we were skimming through what she had written.
Okay. Do you know what those videos are today?
I do not know.
Wouldn't you have reviewed those as in your role as a member of the captain's review board? The evidence that the subject of that review board provided in her defense?
I don't know when we would have reviewed it. If much of it is body cam, it would have already been reviewed prior to the captain's board. So much of that was most likely redundant, and it was later reviewed, and much of it was kind of very much irrelevant to the nature of what she was being accused of.
Didn't Detective Phillips tell you what the videos were in her report or her statement?
She may have, I don't remember specifically, no.
I mean, you've made a lot of references to the 21-page report. Didn't she provide that information in there?
Whether she wrote it down or orally gave it to us, I don't remember exactly. I know there was a packet with 21 pages and possibly a DVD or a thumb drive. I don't recall exactly.
Do you recall Detective Phillips' complaint to both the Board of Public Safety and the videos, and her complaint to the Police Merit Commission advising in the header that she had videos of the July 12th, 2022 incident in her possession, and that she would be willing to release the viewing of these videos once the case had been concluded?
I don't remember the verbiage on either of those complaints that if I ever saw them.
Why didn't anyone advise Detective Phillips at the time that she stated she had these videos that what she had done was inappropriate?
I don't know.
And why did Sergeant Hauser wait until November, 3 months later, to file a complaint for something that had been publicly known since August?
I don't know why. I don't know that the nature of the complaint is the same as what you're speaking to. I don't know that that was the nature of Detective Hauser's complaint.
Well, she complained about the downloading of the videos, didn't she?
I don't know. Do you have a copy of the complaint?
Just a moment, sir. Refer you to Exhibit 56, the amended grievance, page 12. I'm sorry. Accusation 15, additional violations. Additionally, during the process of EPD putting you on administrative leave on November 1st, 2022, is it? Okay. It's, pardon me, it's accusation 13. On page 12.
What document are we reading from?
Exhibit 56. You downloaded multiple videos and reports from an ongoing criminal investigation. you used Elkhart Police Department camcorders to record parts of the ongoing criminal investigation.
Do you mean your Exhibit 56 or my Exhibit 56?
B. Phillips Exhibit 56, page 12. First full paragraph at the top of page 12. You downloaded multiple videos.
That's
and-
Vicki Becker's letter.
This is Exhibit 56 is Vicki Becker's letter?
I mean, on the exhibits that you gave to me, I printed them all out, and that's what it is.
Okay. I'm going to hand you the amended charges. Sir, I'd like you to read the first paragraph at the top of page 12 of the amended charges.
This is the amended charges, or the most recent charging? Is that what I'm reading?
Yes, sir. If you'd like, I can show you the header, the first page to the letter, if that helps you understand the exhibit. Go ahead, sir.
And sorry, before I read this, what was the nature of the question? It's been a second.
Well, first, I'd like you to read it, and you said you weren't sure what videos Sergeant Phillips was, or excuse me, Detective Phillips was accused of downloading. So I'd like you to read the paragraph.
You downloaded multiple videos and reports from an ongoing criminal investigation. You used Elkhart Police Department camcorders to record parts of the ongoing criminal investigation. You attached over 170 thumb drive type devices to your department-issued laptop, which is outside the number of devices that we would expect you to be attached to your office-issued laptop. The Elkhart Police Department cannot account for where the records you downloaded to those 170-plus devices may have been distributed. You also inappropriately and intentionally released parts of this ongoing criminal investigation to unauthorized persons without authorizations, including emailing materials not authorized for release to your husband's email address and to your own private attorneys.
Okay. So my question is, you didn't inform Joy Phillips that she was doing something wrong in downloading these videos until a year after, or months after, you'd already been shown the videos and told that she had them and that she was using them as part of her defense. Why didn't you counsel her before that, hey, you can't do this?
So I think the concerning point here would be when she initially provided them to the captain's board, it may not have been immediately apparent the scope and scale of what she was doing. This charging information also talks about emailing them to herself, emailing to her attorney, and that's where I'm assuming some of the attention got drawn, as opposed to simply downloading for her own personal use within a captain's board, which still is an issue, but was obviously not apparently known immediately to the captains during the captain's review board. This paragraph includes a lot more than just downloading videos and using them for her captain's board.
But, all right. Good.
Sorry.
Did you tell Sergeant Hauser to write up Detective Phillips regarding this violation? Excuse me, the first allegation, I'm sorry. Did you tell did you tell Sergeant Hauser to write up Detective Phillips?
No, I did not.
Not necessarily regarding the videos, but anything else?
No, I did not.
Okay. Did someone else tell Sergeant Hauser to write up Detective Phillips?
I don't believe so. I can't testify for somebody else.
Okay. Did you provide any assistance to Sergeant Hauser as she...
Sergeant Hauser and Sergeant Roundtree came to me shortly after the 12th. I believe it was the morning of the 13th, and had concerns about Joy's behavior. And at that point, we were switching back between RMS as a complaint module and Benchmark, which is another software system, as a complaint module. They spoke to the nature of the concerns, and their question was, does it go in RMS or does it go in Benchmark?
Okay. So Sergeant Hauser's response to Joy Phillips was supposed to be a supervisor counseling, wasn't it?
She wouldn't necessarily determine what happens with her disciplines or her complaints that she documents.
So what Sergeant Hauser intended as an informal counseling got turned into a formal complaint, which in turn led to Phillips going to the captain's review board.
The two complaints were similar in nature and based on the same day, so they were combined and addressed together.
And you told Sergeant Hauser not to tell Detective Phillips about the write-up, didn't you?
Yes, I did. I believe Sergeant Hauser's was first to be entered in a Benchmark, and we were waiting for some of the IA staff to get back into the building as the second complaint from Brandon Roundtree was entered, and then the supplemental information from Dustin Young. Knowing that there was two coming that were very similar in nature, we held off notifying her until it could be assessed on which direction it was going to go.
So you held on to Sergeant Hauser's complaint for 5 days?
I did not hold on to it for 5 days, but notification to Joy was held off for a few so IA could assess and make an initial assessment on kind of what their plan of action was going to be.
Had any supervisor counseled Detective Phillips about these complaints?
Like sat down and spoke with her? No, not until she was notified.
That's the first level of progressive discipline under department policy, isn't it? This informal discussion?
It depends on the nature of the accusation. If the violation is more severe, it's less likely to be just informal discussion. There's mitigators and aggravators to that.
And termination is the last step in progressive discipline.
It could be the first step depending on the nature of the violation again.
So you didn't even start with the first level of discipline, formal counseling. You went straight to termination.
No.
That's what you're asking for, isn't it?
Oh, I think there's also been some counselings presented already either today or yesterday on where she was talked to about performance or certain behaviors. I believe the captain's board that's been kind of blended into this one was a 2 or 3 day suspension. I believe it was 3 day suspension. So she has been counseled. She's been suspended for 3 days and now we're here.
For termination.
I believe that's the request, yes.
Now, sexual harassment of a coworker is an egregious offense, isn't it?
It could be, yes.
And potentially grounds for termination.
Potentially.
Are you aware of any member of the Elkhart Police Department having been accused of sexually harassing another member of the Elkhart Police Department?
I believe there have been some of those claims, yes.
And in fact, there have been allegations against ranking members of the Elkhart Police Department about sexual harassment.
I believe so, yes.
And those members are still employed at the Elkhart Police Department, aren't they?
I'm not sure of all the complaints or the nature of all those. Some are, some aren't.
Isn't your part of your duty as the assistant chief to know the status of those allegations and whether the subjects of those allegations are still employed at the department?
To some degree, yes. It's also 140 some odd employees, and Some have been there longer than I have, some shorter, so it's difficult to keep a track of everything all at once, especially if it's not relevant in the relatively current time frame.
How about the people who filed those complaints? Are they still employed at the Elkhart Police Department?
Some maybe not. I don't know all of them.
Detective Phillips filed a complaint for sexual harassment against Detective Ryan Weir, didn't she?
I'm not familiar with the nature of a sexual harassment complaint between Phillips and Weir, no.
Perhaps I misspoke. Perhaps it was harassment of a more general nature that was not necessarily sexual. Call it a hostile work environment.
I don't think it met hostile work environment, but I believe Lieutenant Rathel or someone else testified that there were some claims made back and forth between Detective Weir and Detective Phillips, yes.
Okay. You never investigated that complaint against Detective Weir, did you?
It was investigated, it just wasn't investigated by me.
Do you know if the product of those investigations was provided to Detective Phillips in discovery in these proceedings?
I do not know that, no.
Could it be because it doesn't exist?
There's a handful of investigations that Detective Phillips has been a part of with different members of the department. If your allegation is that all of a sudden a claim doesn't exist, that's not accurate. I don't know what was provided in discovery and what wasn't.
Ryan Weir is a friend of yours, isn't he?
He's an acquaintance, yeah.
Now, he's filed complaints against Detective Phillips, hasn't he?
I believe he has, yes.
Did you ever give Detective Phillips a letter saying that she would face a captain's review board next day for a complaint that Detective Weir filed against her?
The only time I think that would be even possible, there was a complaint, an ongoing complaint, an investigation with Internal Affairs that was going on amongst several of the detectives back in the Detective Bureau. As I went to IA, and Andy Anderson, the previous IA before me, had left, and I had helped distribute some of the paperwork towards the end of his investigation, but I was no part of it. That's the only thing I can think you could be referring to.
Okay. Detective Phillips was never interviewed regarding Ryan Weir's complaint against her, was she?
I have no knowledge of any of those investigations. I was not part of any of them.
So if Detective Phillips testified that she was never interviewed regarding Ryan Weir's complaint against her, you would have no reason to disagree with that?
I'm not familiar with the investigations. I don't know if she was or wasn't.
Did Detective Weir also file a complaint for emotional stress against Detective Phillips for being named in a sexual harassment complaint, or excuse me, just harassment complaint by Phillips against him?
I don't know. I don't recall. I wasn't part of those investigations if there was one. I'd have to get with IA and get files from there. I do not know those answers.
You were, now at the time, you weren't assistant chief, correct?
At the time of what?
But of Ryan Weir's complaint?
I don't know when the complaint was. I don't.
Were you the head of professional standards at the time of the complaint?
I don't remember the complaint. I'm not sure what you're speaking to. So
You also don't know if you gave her a letter saying that for a captain's review board?
I'm somewhat confident that I gave a captain's review notice to Detective Phillips, referenced the internal investigation that was conducted by Andy Anderson.
Now, Detective Phillips spoke to you, didn't she? And she told you that she thought that Ryan Weir's complaint against her was simply retaliation for her complaint against him for harassment.
She may have. I don't remember.
Did you ever investigate Ryan Weir for retaliation, which I believe would be a violation of policy 1004.
Again, I'm not, I know there was investigations done involving members of CID. I was no part of an IA investigation when I sat in IA that investigated either Ryan Weir or Detective Phillips that I can remember at all.
But you did require Detective Phillips to attend a mediation session with Ryan Weir, didn't you?
Yeah, there was an ongoing issue. Again, it's been asked and answered before that where Ryan or Detective Weir and Detective Phillips had an ongoing problem getting along. When I became the CID captain, the issue started to bubble up again, and we got with HR, and HR and the city determined that they would attend mediation.
Okay. But really, you forced her into it. You forced her to be
No,
into
I
what
did
was
not.
an
HR asked her
intimate.
to go and told her she was required to go. I didn't force anybody to do anything.
Let me finish my question, sir. You forced her to be in close quarters in a essentially intimate environment with someone that she believed was harassing her. You required her to attend that.
There was an ongoing problem. The problem was brought up to HR. HR mandated that they attend those meetings.
Okay. And by force, of course, I don't mean that you physically manhandled her. I mean that you ordered her to be there, something she did not want to attend.
Yes, the city collectively ordered them to attend.
Is there a policy that a member of the department has to attend a mediation?
I don't know of any policy that requires that. However, this was out of the scope of the policy. It was within the city guidelines.
Did Detective Phillips submit a complaint to you about being required to attend a mediation and to be in this close environment with someone who she believed was harassing her?
I don't remember a complaint. I know neither of them wanted to be any part of it, but I don't remember a complaint, no.
So you did not log a complaint from her into the computer system?
I don't believe so, no.
Okay. Did you know, prior to the filing of these charges, that Detective Phillips sometimes had a practice of recording her conversations with other officers?
I didn't know for sure. I think it was suspected for quite a while.
Did you, in fact, you've asked Detective Phillips once if she was recording you?
I may have asked her if she makes it a habit.
What was her response?
I don't remember the exact response. It wasn't denial of it. It wasn't I record all the time. It was a middle of the road. Yeah, sometimes I do, essentially, is what I recall that.
If Detective Phillips were to testify that her answer to your question was, "Sir, you've never given me a reason to do so," to record you, would you disagree with that testimony?
I don't remember exactly. It may have been along those lines. Again, it wasn't, when I asked, it wasn't an overly aggressive or confrontational conversation. It could have been, but again, I don't remember the specifics of it.
Did you ever reprimand Detective Phillips for recording other officers?
I never did know.
Did she ever give you recordings that she had made? Again, prior to these proceedings and the discovery that has occurred?
I don't believe so. No, not at all.
Do you know of any other officers who have recorded fellow policemen while on duty? And again, this is not. Of course, I don't include here body cam footage and.
No, I'm not aware of anyone that actively, proactively records officers. No.
But Ryan Weir provided you with a recording he made of fellow officers, didn't he?
If he did, I don't remember it, no.
And in fact, it was specifically regarding an accusation Weir made about Detective Phillips.
If he did, I do not recall it.
Have you ever reprimanded any of those other officers for recording coworkers?
The other officers that I don't know that recorded stuff, no, I have not.
You recall informing Detective Phillips that there was no disciplinary record in her personnel file at the time you were at Internal Affairs.
I know I had a conversation with Detective Phillips within the IA office, reviewing some of the IA records that she was involved with. I don't remember specifically commenting about her disciplinary record.
Now, you testified at the Board of Public Safety hearing, didn't you, regarding Ms. Phillips?
Yes, I did.
And at that hearing, wasn't your testimony that there were no disciplinary records in Joy Phillips' personnel file?
I don't remember the testimony. I don't believe there was at that time. I don't know that I've looked through her disciplinary file. I know there's, again, a handful of complaints, again, that were addressed earlier. I don't know that anything actually made it into her disciplinary file.
And when was that hearing?
Sometime last year. I don't recall the specific dates.
If I told you September and October, or October 11th and 25th of last year, would you agree with that?
It sounds about right.
So as of October 2022, there were no disciplinary records in Joy Phillips' personnel file.
I believe the only one that would be there, and it would have been probably after that safety board grievance hearing, was the most recent one, the 3 days reference the response to the burglary.
Did Detective Phillips complain to the Indiana State Police that you criminally confined her on November 1st, 2022?
Same objection. This is about a pending case where Vicki Becker declined to file charges. They're seeking a special prosecutor. I would request this witness take the fifth.
Say that last bit again.
That this witness take the fifth.
Sir, are you refusing to answer my question?
Yeah, I'm not going to speak on that event.
Grounds of the Fifth Amendment?
Yes.
Have you ever been placed on administrative leave?
Yes.
Have you been placed on administrative leave regarding any accusations of criminal conduct that Ms. Phillips made against you?
Again, that falls in line with an event I'm not going to speak on, reference my Fifth Amendment right.
Did the Elkhart Police Department conduct an investigation of the November 1st event other than the one conducted by Lieutenant Hostetler of the Indiana State Police?
I'm going to revert back to I'm not commenting on that.
Are you invoking your Fifth Amendment right against self-incrimination?
Yes, I am.
Did Prosecutor Vicki Becker charge you for criminally confining Detective Phillips?
Again, I'm invoking my Fifth Amendment right to self-incrimination. I'm not speaking on that event.
So Detective Phillips was placed on administrative leave for a non-criminal accusation, but you were being investigated by the Indiana State Police for a forcible felony, but were not placed on administrative leave.
Are you asking me that or saying that?
I'm asking if that's true.
I think you asked that in a different way, and it's the same response. I'm not speaking to that event based on my Fifth Amendment right.
Was it required under departmental policy to interview Detective Phillips regarding all these accusations against her?
No, it's not.
So a member of the Elkhart Police Department can make be accused falsely of anything and not have an opportunity to defend herself.
That's not accurate.
She would not be interviewed and given the opportunity in a formal interview before charges are filed to tell her side of the story.
There is no requirement that I'm aware of under policy or contract that requires that we interview anybody as a member of the police department during an investigation. There are guidelines that stipulate to, if we are, how we conduct those interviews. And to speak on the point, she had ample opportunity when she came into the captain's board and spoke for roughly an hour, provided all kinds of documentation. She spoke during a safety board hearing, and she has ample opportunity to represent her here now. So to characterize it as no opportunity to represent herself is inaccurate.
So her opportunity to speak on her behalf came after she's already charged with career-ending discipline. She had no opportunity to avert these charges. That's true, isn't it?
She spoke during the captain's review board that I was involved with, and I think Prosecutor Vicki Becker mentioned that it wasn't career-ending, there was salvageability with it.
No further questions. Thank you, Chief.
Any questions for Chief?
Yes. Attorney McQuarrie keeps referring to supervisor counselings as discipline. Is that an accurate description?
No, it's not.
Can you, you were on the captain's review board that Attorney McQuarrie discussed with you that recommended ultimately a 3-day suspension against Detective Phillips. Can you tell us why the captain's review board recommended that 3-day suspension?
The main topics that came out of that initial captain's review board that led to that 3-day suspension were I think I mentioned it before, where in the recording with Dustin Young, it was clear he talks about an officer saw the car backed up and whether the door was open or the trunk was open. Although I believe they were, it's kind of irrelevant in the sense that an officer saw a car backed up to an empty building that shouldn't have been there, on top of the daughter of the owner showing up and chasing 2 subjects away in the car that the officer saw. When that was represented down the line of the chain of command to Sergeant Roundtree, as there were no witnesses available, that was one of the big concerns of the misrepresentation of facts that Detective Phillips did. The other concern was the witnesses or the suspects were critical, and I believe going through the paperwork and the recordings, yes, one was Memorial, the other one was EGH. At no time, if I remember correctly, did Dustin Young say they were both critical and too incoherent to speak with, and that's how Sergeant Roundtree indicated that it was relayed to him. A, there was no witnesses, and B, both suspects were too incoherent to talk to. Both of those seemed inaccurate when we reviewed the videos and talked to either Sergeant Roundtree or Sergeant Young. Now the other point was, so it was the inconsistency, the manipulating of the facts or the omitting facts was a big concern, and then the way that Detective Phillips talked to Sergeant Roundtree once they both arrived at the police department. That was another part of the concern that led to the consensus, along with, it was one of the complaints, supervisor counselings that were entered into RMS reference radio traffic where Detective Phillips said, no, I was told by Captain Price that I didn't have to use it. And when Captain Price was asked, said, no, I never said that, which kind of fell in lines with the bending the truth to come to the conclusion that she wants. So those were the main points that led us to that suggestion during the initial Captain's Review Board.
Attorney McQuarrie has asked you a lot of questions about the facts of a burglary on July 12th. Are those facts in any way relevant to Joy Phillips' 3-day suspension?
I don't believe so, no.
If ultimately everything that Detective Phillips told Sergeant Roundtree proved at the end of the investigation to be true, would that justify her having told Sergeant Roundtree something different than what Sergeant Young relayed to her?
No, it would not.
Let's talk about the search warrant. Can you tell us what was going on with the search warrant?
In what aspect of it?
What was the basis of Detective Phillips not wanting to write a search warrant? What were the things she was citing to?
It was, I think most of the basis for not wanting to write it, I can't speak to the personal, I have some feelings on why she didn't want to. If I remember correctly, most of the argument was we had no witnesses of anybody in the building. And there were no items stolen that they wanted to point to or acknowledge. I think those were the basis of her argument. I think those were inaccurate based on, again, there were clearly witnesses. There was alcohol or alcohol bottles around it. And if some of the investigation was done properly initially, I think they would have overcome that pretty quickly.
Prior to making a recommendation to suspend Joy for 3 days to the chief, did the Captain's Review Board take Joy's 21-page defense into consideration?
Much of it was looked at. However, much of it was irrelevant to the issues that I spoke about moments ago.
So it was taken into account?
Yes, it was.
No further questions.
Chief,
Go ahead.
Chief, when, on the day of July 12th, when when Detective Young, or excuse me, Sergeant Young called Joy Phillips and asked her to come in, she came in, didn't she?
Yes, she did.
And she worked that investigation.
Some portions of it, yes.
The only thing she didn't do was write a search warrant. Is that days later? Isn't that correct?
To categorize it as the only thing, or if you're referring to the only issue at hand was that she didn't write a search warrant, that's not accurate. The Captain's Review Board reviewed the information at hand, and not writing a search warrant wasn't part of what she was disciplined for.
But ultimately, she came in, she worked that investigation, and what was it that she failed to do?
She got a call from Sergeant Young. When she took on the information from Sergeant Young, she misinterpreted, omitted, didn't relay the accurate facts beyond the scope of reasonableness, in my opinion, on what the evidence that was given to her in an attempt to avoid having to come in or write a search warrant. Then her attitude towards Sergeant Roundtree was negative, and to the degree that it caused concern for both the sergeants. Those are the things she did.
So, in fact, she never omitted. What facts do you contend that she had omitted?
He was told there was people that saw them leaving the building. An officer saw them leaving the building. I believe there was witnesses mentioned at the scene of the car accident. When she told Sergeant Roundtree that there were no witnesses, she omitted that. When she said the suspects were too incoherent to talk, that was inaccurate because she wasn't told that one was at Memorial, and that is likely to be too incoherent to talk. However, the other one was at EGH, but she represented it to Sergeant Roundtree as they were too incoherent to speak.
And yet, she came in per his request.
After she misrepresented the facts, yes, she did come in.
Where can you show that Dustin Young actually gave her that information?
I believe the body cam was played earlier.
If I am going to show you portion of a departmental policy. This is policy 1010. I'd like you to read the highlighted, oh, thank you, section.
It's very helpful to all of us if you speak the name of the exhibit into the record for us, please. Thank you.
It is policy 1010, specifically 1010.13, levels of discipline, and it is our exhibit number 2.
Can we see a copy of that?
Chief, could you go ahead and read the section for which the header is highlighted?
The following are levels of discipline: corrective action from least to the greatest, counseling, talking to the officer, documentation in the employee module in RMS, verbal reprimand. After review from the captain's board, a verbal reprimand that is documented for tracking purposes, written reprimand, a written reprimand from the chief of police, corrective training, additional training to correct deficiencies, reassignment, a change of job duties or position, suspension, loss of work without pay, demotion, loss of rank, and termination, loss of employment.
Thank you, sir. Could I have that back? Okay. So we're here today for a hearing on whether Joy Phillips should be terminated, correct?
Yes.
Okay. So that's the 8th level of discipline. Was Joy Phillips ever demoted? That's the 7th level of discipline.
Not that I'm aware of, no.
And in fact, Joy Phillips never received a suspension. That's the 6th level of discipline.
I believe she was suspended for 3 days prior to this investigation, yes.
That was on a different accusation, wasn't it?
For this, yeah, you would only get discipline for one event. So last year, I believe it was last year or the year before, the reference to burglary, there was discipline of a 3-day suspension issued for the actions in and around that burglary and her response.
The 5th level of discipline is reassignment, a changing of duties or job position. Joy Phillips was never subjected to that either, was she?
I don't believe so, and like I mentioned earlier, there's different mitigating and aggravating factors for each action that is investigated or found to be sustained against an officer. To assume that regardless of the action, we would do just start at the bottom and work our way up slowly is unrealistic. Sometimes it goes straight to discipline, sometimes it can start at written reprimand. It's going to depend on the nature of the claim and the nature of the accusation on where it starts.
Fourth level of discipline is corrective training. Joy Phillips never received that level of discipline either, did she?
I don't know if she did or not.
The third level of discipline is a written reprimand from the chief of police. She never received that level of discipline either.
I don't believe so, no.
The second level of discipline is a verbal reprimand. She never received that level of discipline either.
Not that I'm aware of, no.
And in fact, you told Sergeant Hauser not to tell Joy Phillips about the written reprimand or about the complaint.
Yes, Sergeant Hauser and Sergeant Roundtree both wrote up complaints within benchmark. Sergeant Hauser's was done earlier, and as opposed to notifying her of one, we waited till IA got back in so they could review both of them since they were similar in date, time, and the nature of them to see what course they were going to take. So we held off on notifying her until we had some collective vision on which route it was going to go.
So she wasn't notified immediately of the complaint.
If you're speaking of the initial complaint that led to the 3-day suspension, yes.
The first level of discipline is counseling, talking to the officer and documentation of the employee, documentation in the employee module in the RMS. Did that happen?
I believe there were some of those examples read either earlier today or yesterday, so that has happened, yes.
So with these charges, you moved directly from counseling to termination.
I believe it went from counseling. I would include the 3-day suspension and termination. And again, to reiterate the same point, it depends on the nature of the allegations, on how far up or down that chain of discipline that it starts at.
No further recross, or redirect, excuse me. Thank you,
Any
Chief.
recross?
These policies that you just read out, are they the current policies?
I'm not sure. I know there was a change in the 1010 policy recently. I'm not sure if that was this. I'd have to compare and contrast to know for sure.
If I were to show you a copy of the current policy, would you recognize it?
That would help, yes. Assuming you're speaking to 1010.1.14.2, levels of discipline?
Correct.
Yes.
So in the former policy, levels of discipline / corrective action were all melded together, and in the new policy, could you explain what corrective changes were taken?
It looks like it's simplified. At least it took the corrective action out. It took the training essentially out of it, so there's separate corrective action and or discipline.
And does supervisor counseling fall under discipline?
No, it does not. It falls under corrective action.
And so it's just made clear, whereas it was less clear in the former policy, correct?
Correct.
No further questions.
Very briefly, Your Honor. Weren't those changes made very recently?
I believe they were made relatively recently, yes.
In fact, they were made after Joy Phillips' Board of Safety hearing, weren't they?
I believe so, yes.
No further questions.
No further questions.
Thank you, Chief. Appreciate your testimony.